For 2 straight years, the WNBA tried to sell a comforting illusion that its sudden explosion in relevance was the result of collective growth, shared momentum, and a new generation of stars. But illusions collapse the moment numbers enter the room, and now, quietly but unmistakably, the league and its media partners have finally admitted the truth they spent years avoiding. This era was not built by committee, it was built by one gravitational force, one player, one name that bent the entire ecosystem around her presence. Caitlin Clark didn't just elevate a franchise, she altered the economic trajectory of an entire professional league. And the reason this admission detonated so much internal tension is simple. Once reality becomes undeniable, every competing narrative dies instantly. Attendance patterns flipped overnight. Television schedules reshaped themselves around one rookie. Neutral fans who had never watched a WNBA game suddenly planned their evenings around tip-off times. This wasn't organic league growth, it was market correction caused by star power. Before Clark arrived, the Indiana Fever were buried near the bottom of attendance rankings, invisible to national audiences, functionally irrelevant to television executives. After her arrival, that same franchise became the league's most reliable draw, night after night, city after city. Meanwhile, teams that were already strong at the gate saw no comparable lift from other hyped rookies. That contrast forced executives into an uncomfortable corner. You can celebrate multiple talents while still admitting that only one player actually changed consumer behavior at scale. And that's what finally happened. Not because the league suddenly found honesty, but because the money made denial impossible. Media executives don't invest billions based on vibes or fairness narratives. They invest based on who moves audiences, who holds attention, and who converts curiosity into habit. When one player consistently transforms low-interest games into appointment viewing, the league doesn't get to pretend that impact is evenly distributed. That illusion collapses under its own data. The frustration from certain corners of the league isn't about respect, it's about hierarchy. Because once the league admits that one athlete didn't just join the system, but rescued it from stagnation, every internal power dynamic shifts. And that's the part no one wanted to say out loud. To understand why this truth took so long to surface, you have to rewind to the moment the WNBA was quietly fighting for survival. Not dominance, not expansion, not cultural relevance, but basic operational stability. In early 2022, league executives weren't dreaming about blockbuster media deals or mainstream buzz. They were having uncomfortable conversations about contraction risk, investor confidence, and long-term sustainability. That was the environment that led to the league selling a minority equity stake, not as a victory lap, but as a financial pressure valve. The valuation sounded impressive on paper, but context matters. Equity sales at that stage weren't about growth acceleration. They were about ensuring the lights stayed on, while leadership searched for a catalyst that didn't yet exist. Marketing discussions focused on incremental gains. Audience projections were conservative. Expansion was theoretical. Nobody in those rooms believed women's basketball was about to experience a ratings-driven shockwave capable of redefining its negotiating leverage. And that's where the irony becomes unavoidable. While executives were trying to stabilize a fragile business model, a college player was already doing what no internal strategy had achieved, commanding national attention at a scale that dwarfed professional benchmarks. By the time Clark entered the league, the blueprint for transformation was already written in plain sight, even if leadership didn't fully grasp it yet. What followed wasn't gradual growth. It was a structural inflection point. Television partners stopped treating WNBA broadcasts as filler programming. Arenas that once struggled for visibility became sellout environments. The league's entire bargaining position shifted from defensive to aggressive in under 2 seasons. That doesn't happen because of steady league health. It happens because demand suddenly overwhelms supply. And once that demand is traceable to one central attraction, the business reality becomes unavoidable. The investors who expected modest, patient returns suddenly found themselves attached to a rapidly appreciating asset. The league that once begged for capital now dictated terms. This wasn't a coincidence or a collective awakening. It was the delayed realization that a single athlete had fundamentally altered the league's risk profile. And admitting that reality meant admitting something else too, that the league's previous ceiling wasn't broken by internal planning, but by an external force they hadn't fully anticipated or controlled. The final collapse of the old narrative didn't happen because of debate shows or fan arguments. It happened because of contracts. When major networks commit long-term money at historic levels, they don't hedge their language. They identify the driver. And once those partners began openly attributing the league's surge in value to audience behavior tied to one player, silence was no longer an option. An 11-year media agreement doesn't materialize out of optimism. It materializes out of proof. And the proof was brutal in its clarity. Certain games performed regardless of market, opponent, or time slot. Certain broadcasts carried the entire league's momentum. Certain jerseys, highlights, and even off-court appearances outperformed competing products. That's not normal league parity. That's star-driven economics. This reality also explains the internal friction that followed. Veteran frustration wasn't rooted in jealousy as much as displacement. When revenue growth is visibly linked to one arrival, legacy narratives lose leverage. And when salary negotiations begin against the backdrop of unprecedented revenue optimism, messaging suddenly matters more than emotion. Public complaints that might have once resonated now landed differently with a fan base that understood exactly where the momentum came from. Even respected voices inside the sport began warning that rhetoric, not policy, was becoming the problem, that alienating the very audience fueling the boom was self-destructive. The league's power structure had changed, and not everyone adjusted at the same speed. What's undeniable now is that the WNBA didn't just grow, it pivoted. From survival mode to expansion talk, from defensive bargaining to competitive bidding, from niche coverage to mainstream relevance. And that pivot traces back to a single inflection point. The league didn't want a golden goose narrative because golden geese disrupt balance. But markets don't care about balance, they care about demand. And demand chose its centerpiece. 2.5 years late, the league finally said what the numbers had been screaming all along. Not because they wanted to, but because the era of pretending otherwise had become financially impossible. The part of this story that still makes people uncomfortable isn't the rise itself, it's the fallout. Because once a league's growth is clearly tied to one central figure, every future decision becomes a stress test of honesty. You can't fake neutrality anymore. You can't pretend fan behavior is evenly spread. You can't sell unity while quietly structuring the business around one gravitational pull. And that's exactly where the WNBA now finds itself. Every scheduling choice, every national broadcast slot, every marketing campaign, every expansion discussion is already being filtered through a single question. Executives won't say publicly, but absolutely ask privately. Does this benefit or dilute the audience Caitlin Clark brought in? That's not favoritism. That's survival logic in modern sports economics. Leagues don't exist to manage feelings. They exist to convert attention into revenue without breaking trust. The real danger isn't that Clark is too powerful. It's that parts of the league still resist acknowledging how much of the current ecosystem depends on her. Resistance creates friction, and friction kills momentum. Fans can smell insecurity instantly. When they sense a league is uncomfortable with its own success story, they disengage. That's why messaging missteps matter now more than ever. Complaints that might once have sounded principled now land as tone-deaf. Internal disputes that might once have been invisible now spill into public perception because the spotlight is hotter, brighter, and far less forgiving. This is the price of relevance. You don't get mass attention without mass accountability. And the league's next test won't be about whether Caitlin Clark remains a star. That's already settled.